The late morning program with Namras podcast.
Hare Krishna, everyone. You're listening to the Namras podcast, the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I'm really so honored to have Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, His Grace Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, and His Grace Murali Manohar Prabhu on the podcast today. Thank you for joining me, Prabhus.
Great to be here.
Appreciate it. So Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu is the Global Minister of Deity Worship for ISKCON, and Murali Manohar Prabhu is the representative of the UK for the Deity Worship Ministry. So we want to talk all things deity worship today, but I wanted to first get into, you've been traveling all over America now, and going to different temples, seeing what the standards are for deity worship. And I know that there's a lot to improve on, but there's also things that devotees are doing well. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain about that. Like, what has been your experience traveling throughout America and seeing what deity worship has become like right now in 2024 in ISKCON temples?
We go first. Or we go first?
Well, the first thing I've really appreciated, because I've been based in central London most of my devotional life.
Yeah.
I've done a bit of traveling in Europe, but this is the second time I've been in America. So I'm really appreciating the wonderful communities you have in America. Devotees serving together, working together and serving together, and to see what they're achieving as well.
Right.
We visited Washington, beautiful temple, Naperville, beautiful temple, beautiful community. So it's really successful, you could say, ISKCON North America, from what I can see. It looks to be thriving.
Yeah.
In that way. It's expanding and the congregations are getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a really positive inspiration.
If I could, sorry, interrupt. If you could just move a little bit towards me,
Okay.
because I just want you to be in the shot there. You see that second?
So I'll move the chair towards you.
Yeah, the chair towards me, and then the mic can also come.
Okay.
We'll edit all this stuff. But yeah, great. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Got to silence that.
So for me, it's been great as well because I love to look at other Pujari departments
Yes.
and how they run, how they function, how they work, and sometimes how they might not work. And I learn lots of things, and I can share what I learn as well. So it's always good. Pujaris are always excited about visiting different Pujaris, Pujari departments. It's very interesting.
What's been your experience?
Well, yeah, similar experiences, and I especially resonate with that point Murali's making about, sharing, because you see, like different temples have different practices they do, which are really good. Like before I came across here, I was in Europe, in Italy, and some of the things I was picking up from Villa Vrindavan, I've shared with devotees over here about how they're doing things there. Things like, oftentimes when they put the Radharani's veil on, they'll pin it to the wig. But most temples, you see, they'll pin it while the wig's on the deity, rather than pinning it. But in Villa Vrindavan, they pin it before, so there's no chance of scratching Radharani with a pin. So things like that. Also, as Murali Manohar Prabhu was saying about the communities, fantastic communities. I mean, just devotees everywhere you go are just so nice, so sweet. And we've been discussing this as we've been traveling about how, that's the greatest wealth we have is the association of devotees. It's so wonderful to have the opportunity to spend time with devotees and get to know devotees and to serve with devotees and to be able to offer some service. Because as we've been traveling around, we've been doing seminars and workshops where we're going in Chicago and Naperville, Washington, D.C., also in Philadelphia. And to get that opportunity to offer some service to the devotees is also very nice. Things like Naperville, the Pujari department, a really well laid out Pujari department, with lots of bench space, drawers that are designed for the paraphernalia, things like that. Some of the newer temples, they seem to have put a bit more thought and energy into the design, whereas some of the older temples, and I understand because you're in a building it's already built, you can't really do a lot to change it. You can do some small things, but structurally you're kind of stuck with it. So, you'll see, as the buildings get older also, they become more dilapidated, the cost of fixing them becomes prohibitively expensive, and then also you get trouble with vermin, mice, cockroaches, things like that. So that's one of the challenges with older buildings. in terms of, we on room for improvement now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, in terms of room for improvement, I don't think this is unique to the US. I think it's a problem everywhere I go, is the lack of cleanliness. And anyone who's done deity worship will know that there was only, well, there's more, but the two main points that Prabhupada emphasized whenever he spoke about deity worship and Brahminical life was cleanliness and punctuality. And so over the years, we've sort of collected quite a lot of references from Prabhupada where he really emphasizes the importance of cleanliness. And, Prabhupada's made statements like, without cleanliness, it's not possible to make advancement in spiritual life. By cleanliness, you can come to the point of seeing Krishna face to face. It really pushes upon the point of how important cleanliness is. And even though we see that Prabhupada emphasized this point again and again and again and again, I mean, so many times he pushed on this point, devotees haven't got it in many places. Some places they've got it, really well. But in many places you see they really just haven't got how important it is in our spiritual life. And as I was saying, Prabhupada says in the 13th chapter of the Gita, in the purport there, without cleanliness it's not possible to make spiritual advancement. So that's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah.
If you don't have cleanliness, you're not going to make spiritual advancement. And then to understand what it means to be clean, it doesn't mean just washing your clothes. Of course, that's a part of it.
Yes.
It doesn't mean having a shower. That's also a part of it. But it's a lot more than that. And Hari Prabhu, who was traveling with Prabhupada for about 16 months, I think, he, a few years ago, did a lecture series about Prabhupada and cleanliness. And so he's allowed us to upload that onto our YouTube channel. So our YouTube channel is called ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry on YouTube. If you go there and search that, you'll see it was about 5 hours, I think?
Yeah.
About 5 hours of classes.
5 hours.
Wow.
Of Hari Sori talking about Prabhupada and cleanliness. And it's of course, Prabhupada talks about some of the more significant things, but he also talks about some of the details. And one of the things, there's an interesting story Hari Sori Prabhu tells about Prabhupada had asked Hari Sori to get some salt for his meal. He was serving him lunch. So he went and got some salt. It took him quite some time to get the salt and bring it back. And then the next day, Prabhupada asked him again for salt, and it took him a few minutes to bring it back. And so Prabhupada quizzed him. He said, yesterday, when I asked you to bring salt, it took you this amount of time. But today I asked you in a very short time, you brought salt back. How is that? He said, Prabhupada, I saved some from yesterday. And Prabhupada's response was, malecha. So immediately he was just, pointing out to him what cleanliness means, because if you're saving something from the previous meal, this is what they call uchista,
Right.
which means it's unclean remnants.
Right.
So
Even with salt.
even something like salt.
Wow.
And it's like the same when we do deity worship. It's just like, and this is one of the points we often make when we're training devotees. We had these, in the training, you've experienced the training. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping you're going to talk about that.
Yeah. I want to talk about that for sure.
But we have the devotees sit down and they do the worship from start to finish without a handbook, just from memory.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I push with the devotees is use all the tilak, use all the cotton wool, don't waste anything.
Yes.
Because you can't reuse it, because it's already considered, it's there to be offered, or maybe some prasad gets sprinkled on it or something when you're bathing or something like that, so you can't reuse it. And so this is one of the key elements of being a Brahmin, is a Brahmana needs to understand what is clean and what is not clean. And Prabhupada regularly in his lectures will talk about this, how the two main qualities of a Brahmin in Kali Yuga, the two main qualities in general of a Brahmana, are honesty and purity. And this, a Brahmana needs to be known by their purity. There's so many wonderful stories about Prabhupada and cleanliness. There's a story, we were talking about this the other day, about you probably remember this story of Prabhupada in Mayapur, the nasty toilet.
No.
He was on a morning walk one day, and he came upon this unclean toilet, it was a workers' toilet. And the workers in West Bengal at that time, they're just out in the fields, they're pastoral in the fields and stuff, they don't have toilets, flush toilets, etc. But Prabhupada found this toilet was overflowing. And he was very strong in the way he was speaking to the managers. Then that morning in the Bhagavatam class, the class was practically only about the toilet. And he talked about this nasty toilet. and in the lecture he was talking about how he was talking about when you mix acid and acid, there's no reaction because they have the same nature. But if you mix acid and alkaline, there'll be a reaction. He said there's effervescence. So then he went on to describe, and it's the same way with the modes of nature. If you're under the influence of a particular mode of nature and you come into contact with the same thing, there's no reaction. He says, so if someone's influenced by the mode of ignorance and they come upon this ignorant place, he said, like this nasty toilet, then there's no reaction. But if someone's in the mode of goodness and they come to an unclean place, they're repulsed. And so we were talking about this the other day, actually, in a class I gave in Philadelphia, was how we, it's easy to just, go before the deities and, offer pranams, and it seems very devotional.
Yeah.
But we really need to look at, how we function in our lives in the day-to-day situation to try to really understand where we're at. And especially when you're put in a situation where you're under pressure. How do you respond in those situations? Do you maintain medical standards, or do we revert to the conditioning we grew up with? And that way you can really understand where you're at in terms of Krishna consciousness.
That probably takes also like cleanliness externally, but internally having a good sadhana and hearing and chanting and things like that.
Yeah.
That's probably super important when it comes to that.
It's also quite interesting how Srila Prabhupada could have emphasized so many things in connection to deity worship. But there's two things which he emphasized again and again in his letters, and that's cleanliness and punctuality.
Right.
And they're the two things that most temples, a lot of temples, struggle with. The cleanliness and punctuality. So it seems that Prabhupada kind of had an insight into what was most needed, where he gave the emphasis on cleanliness.
Yeah. How do you deal with being discouraged when there's an element of deity worship that's like very pure and from the Shastra and all that stuff, but then there's an element of like human fickleness when it comes to things like punctuality and cleanliness? Like you constantly have to push these things, because it's not like, okay, now the temple's always going to be punctual, or now the temple's always going to be clean. So there's always like an improvement that's required. So how do you deal with when you're traveling and you see these things like imperfections, so to say, and you have to correct those imperfections? So how do you yourself not be like, oh, this is just like you're like a losing battle in some ways, isn't it? Do you feel like that?
Sometimes.
We try to, I try to like, because I'm a pujari, and I know what it's like trying to keep a pujari department clean.
Right.
Trying to get everyone to be punctual. I was head pujari for a number of years. So I kind of share their struggle. So when I go there with them, when I go to Pacific temples, I don't go there as, like sometimes I mention, we're not coming as the Deity Worship Ministry police.
Right. Yeah, right.
Because that's
right.
But I go there to be part of their team and share with them and to help them.
Right.
But this is how we clean things. This is what copper looks like when it's clean. And the devotees like it, and they get excited and they gather around. So we're not. So I'm kind of I'm there with their team, helping and encouraging them to come to higher stages of cleanliness. So we try not to come across as being like police.
That's hard. That's difficult
It's
to
not
do
easy.
because people know that you're coming, so they're like, oh, they're coming, so they have to act a certain way or do a certain thing, but preparation before they.
Yeah.
But one of the things I experience is generally before I come, the temples do a mahakleen.
Right.
But you can see it. It's obvious, because generally what happens is all the things that are visible get cleaned, but I don't look at the things that are visible. I look at,
behind this or behind that.
Well, the thing is, like Melly says, we're not trying to be the deity worship police. That's not our emphasis here at all.
Yeah.
But Srila Prabhupada, he emphasized punctuality and cleanliness for a particular reason. And he said, if you're always attentive to punctuality and cleanliness, then the deity will be happy to accept your offering. So we're just trying to help devotees become very aware of what Prabhupada was helping, trying to encourage us to understand. Because knowing that if we can satisfy Prabhupada, our path back to Godhead is guaranteed. Because what's the point of doing something like deity worship or any other practices in devotional service if it's not going to lead us to the goal? Yep. The goal is to go back to Godhead. And if you do deity worship properly, it'll take you back to Godhead. Your heart will become purified, you go back to Godhead. It's a simple thing. And one of the things Murali said then about getting there with them and doing it, just like when we were at the temple before, I showed how to clean the metal paraphernalia. I showed how the wall could easily be cleaned and things like that. because I had an experience years ago, the first time I did a tour of the temples in America. Then I went down the kitchen just to have a look through the kitchen, and it was really, quite. Well, I pulled, how they have the trays underneath the stove, and I pulled it out. It just looked like a big pizza. All the congealed ghee and rings of, tomato, and you say tomato, in there. And so rather than just sort of saying something about it, I took the tray over the stove and I cleaned over the sink and I cleaned it.
Yeah.
And devotees, it had an effect. Whereas if I just said, look, that needs to be cleaned, that wouldn't have had as much effect as them seeing me do it.
Right.
And one of the things is I find also is you need to develop some sensitivity to devotees, because you don't want to just come wagging the finger at people, because no one likes that. No one likes to be told they're doing it wrong. So, I try to connect with them, and I try to keep a bit of humor about it, so they don't feel like they're getting chastised or anything like that, because that generally doesn't work so well.
I find that most devotees as well, they're very sincere about the service, and they're very sincere about wanting to do nice service. So most of them, devotees take it quite nicely, actually, even though some of the things that Nrsimha Kavaca might point out can be quite serious, but because they're sincere and they want to do better and they want to render nice service, they kind of do appreciate it.
Yeah.
It kind of wakes them up a bit, and we have to increase the standards for Krishna. So they kind of appreciate it. We haven't been thrown out of any temples yet.
I think it's the sincerity of the devotees that keeps me going, really.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you meet opposition, it can kind of be discouraging. But just because the devotees have that sincerity, and I'm hoping they get the sense that I'm just coming there to try and help. I'm just trying to point out how they can do better service to Krishna, because, as Melody was saying, ultimately when you're dealing with devotees, we all have this common focus, is we want to please Krishna. And I've made a point of studying Prabhupada's instructions on this. I'm sure others have done it too. But that's like, basically my service is just about understanding what Prabhupada wanted and just amplifying that, letting devotees know this is what Prabhupada gave us. So let's work together on this.
Yeah.
And I think also getting in there with devotees and rolling your sleeves up and being prepared to, because I used to go on the altar and just sit there and observe, and I found that was for some people unnerving. So rather than do that, I find it better if I go and offer an arati, or I get involved in the festivals. Just like I was in London recently, I just got involved in the Adivas, and devotees found that very encouraging.
Yeah.
When I was in Villa Vrindavan, I was there for the Janmashtami festivals. I got involved in the Abhishek and just all the different functions, and devotees were very inspired by that.
Yeah. Did you ever have to deal with, like, for example, when Prabhupada came and taught deity worship, he taught it a certain way, like it might have been simpler back when he's in the 70s. But now that we are in 2024, we know about, different prayogs and different procedures. Like, how do you balance keeping it to Prabhupada's standard, but also understanding that we have more information about, like, the shastras around deity worship? So could you speak a little bit about the balance between traditional ISKCON, Prabhupada taught deity worship versus like a shastric deity worship?
Well, again, our focus in the ministry is to understand what Prabhupada wanted.
Right.
Because if we can simply please Prabhupada, our path back to Godhead is guaranteed. If we can please him through the service. And Prabhupada gave a very simple standard of worship. And he told both Jamuna and Giriraj Maharaj that, I've given you a simple process because deity worship is not the process for this age. Chanting of Hare Krishna is the process for this age. And if we forget, if we get too caught up in the ritual of deity worship, we'll forget that the deity worship is not the process for this age. We'll think that, we'll forget that Hare Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna is the process.
Yeah.
And so we'll lose our way. And so this is one of the, it's a constant struggle, because, like devotees will go to India and they'll see stuff happening in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, they'll see this and that, and they want to bring it back and introduce it into our ISKCON Deity worship. Yeah. But for me, it's a constant constantly got to be vigilant, but also, push back on these things, is not to make it complicated, because it's not what we're meant to be doing. The reason we do deity worship is so we can purify our heart, so we can come to the point of Kirtaniya Sadahari. That's really what it's about, not deity worship. It's not the process.
Yeah.
But Jiva Goswami points out, this is a supporting process to help us become pure so we can chant Hare Krishna. Because chanting Hare Krishna will deliver us back to Godhead. So it's a struggle.
Yeah, I think also that individually, devotees can be obviously quite welcome to take on whatever level of worship they see or are inspired by. But when it comes to a community or comes to a temple, if the standards are kind of so high, so to speak, it can be quite intimidating to people who think that Pujari service is just not for me. It's just all these rituals, all these rules, and then you've got a shortage of Pujaris. So I think for our ISKCON temples, the temple standards should be as Prabhupada gave us. And if devotees are inspired in a certain way in their own personal worship, then they're quite, they're quite free to do so many rituals if they want. But we find that the standards in the temple are relatively, well, it should be as simple so that devotees feel inspired to come and do the worship.
Yeah, like
That's
that.
one.
Yeah, like the main, like you're saying, the main thing. Our deity worship is not the main thing that Krishna consciousness is about. There's the chanting of the holy name, which is our main practice. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was that I think there's a misconception that only second initiated devotees can do all the things around deity worship.
Yeah.
But could we talk a little bit more about, like, I'm a new person and I want to be involved in deity worship. What can a new person do that's ISKCON standard, go to the temple and I'm allowed to do these things? Like, can I dress Prabhupada? Can I wash the dishes? Or, like, can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. The only real restriction in terms of initiation status is cooking and service on the altar.
Like touching the deity?
No, just service on the altar.
Just on the altar.
Yeah, offering artis and
Got
things
it.
like that.
Okay.
Offering bhoga, dressing the deity. This needs to be done by Brahmins. Because, see, one of the things is when you do deity worship, when you offer any item to the deity, generally it's offered with mantra.
Mm-hmm.
You say, okay, etat padyam, then the Mula mantra of the
right.
Kling Krishnaya Namaha, or whatever. You use the Mula mantra of the deity. So the point is when you get Pancharatri Gayatri Diksha from the Guru, that's when you get those mantras.
Right.
So without the mantras, technically you cannot worship the deity. Home worship is something different.
Mm-hmm.
But in the temple, then you can't really do any worship on the altar without the mantra. So that's a restriction there. As far as the other elements of service, they're pretty wide open in terms of who can do it, as long as they're clean.
Mm.
That's the main thing, is they need to be clean, because everything we're offering to the Lord, we have to, be practicing the topmost standards of cleanliness. And actually, every aspect of devotional service is not just deity worship. Every aspect of devotional service, we need to be clean. Prabhupada would say, the temple room should be shiny like glass. The temple room should be shiny like a new pin. He really pushed cleanliness across every aspect of ISKCON.
Mm.
And this is, as I said, this is the biggest challenge I find wherever I go, is the cleanliness. There's only 2 places I've been where I thought the cleanliness was quite good, and that was the 2 main temples in Hungary.
Oh, right.
Because Shiva Maharaj is a Pujari. And Shiva Maharaj is a very particularly clean person.
Right.
He's actually very inspiring in his standards of cleanliness.
So you went there and you were like, oh, this is impressive with the...
Well, no, I mean, that was good. It was a proper standard of cleanliness.
Yeah.
Like he wherever he lives, all the temples, etc., all, spotlessly clean.
Wow.
Millie even told me a story about one time when Shiva Maharaj was going to a program, and the body pulled up in the car to pick him up, and he opened the door and it was unclean in the car. He said, I'm not getting in there. It's unclean.
Wow.
And I think that's nice to have devotees who actually walk the talk.
Right.
You talk about cleanliness, but also you're not willing to sort of compromise your standards in those situations. I think that's important. But if we can just back up a little bit, one thing I want to mention about before, after Murali was speaking, Prabhupada, and it sort of is connected a bit to this, what we're talking about now. Prabhupada emphasized 5 main things in deity worship: cleanliness and punctuality being the top. Then also he mentioned things like beautiful dressing. The deity should be dressed always very nicely. The deity should always get nice food offerings, very opulent food offerings, and beautiful flowers and scents. And there's an interesting purport that Prabhupada gives in the Madhya Lila, chapter 24, text 334. This one of the reasons I know this is because this, like the first deity worship book in ISKCON, was primarily this purport. It lists the 64 items. When Prabhupada lists the 16 items of worship, you know, the Sodas Puja, he talks about very good sense, good food, beautiful dresses. He's constantly emphasizing quality. And I was listening to a lecture the other day where Prabhupada was talking about offering flowers and things. He said everything for the deity should be first class, better than first class. He said, I'm a person, if you gave me a rubbish flower, how would I feel? And so it's really nice the way Prabhupada makes that connection. You know, he brings out the personal aspect of it. And just like we're at the temple today and we're talking to the head pujari and the temple president there about, you know, dealing with Krishna as a person. If you try to keep the person in the middle, and not just any person, but the supreme person, the greatest person, the person you want to have a relationship with.
Yeah.
And this is going to help us to really look at the quality side of things. You know, keep everything very clean, make sure everything we offer to Krishna is first class. And I think, you know, if we can always keep that personalism in the middle of it, that's going to help us to be more focused on standards, I guess.
Yeah, it's easy to like lose that focus that it's all about Krishna as a person, because if you lose that, then you can easily go off and you know not care so much about the standard and whatnot.
But back to that point as well, qualifications needed for service. So we find in central London, I'm based in central London, Radha London Ashwar Temple. It's a major inspiration for devotees to get a chance to come into the Pujari department and make garlands and assist the pujaris. It can be a great inspiration in their spiritual life. And they get a taste from it as well.
Tell them about that course when you put the notice up for the course.
Yeah, we had this interesting experience. We developed like a pre-service course where you attend a couple of classes, 2 or 3 classes, and before you might go into the Pujari department.
Oh.
So we put that on a notice board, and devotees would see the notice and they saw it and they thought, oh, I can get an opportunity. That if I attend this course, I can go in that place. I can go to that sacred place and I can do some service. And many just were inspired and they came forward.
Wow.
So we had a lot more volunteers come forward.
So like basically not brand new, like not brand new, but they have never been involved.
Yeah, they've kind of involved the community. They're doing
Right.
service, Sunday feast, or like that. They come into classes.
Right.
And they just see they see the Pujari department as something.
Yeah.
But then they get an opportunity. They attend the course and they come into the Pujari department. So that was interesting.
And that's one of the things I also had the experience when I was a new devotee. I was a Sankirtan devotee, and the worship there was such a standard in the Melbourne temple was such a standard that the Sankirtan, because we used to go travelling all week and we come back on the weekend.
Yeah.
And so the worship there was at such a standard that the Sankirtan devotees could go on the altar and do services, which I found really inspiring in my service, to be able to go on and serve the deities in whatever way I could, and then to be able to go back out during the week and do Sankirtan. And you have this like kind of thoughts of the deity, clearly in your head. But if it becomes too complicated, it becomes too complex, we need to know all sorts of rituals and mudras and things like that.
Yeah.
Then that tends to make it like an exclusive club sort of thing.
Mm.
And this is also one of the things, getting back to your question about standards, this is one of the points where, for me, where I'm really endeavouring to find that balance between, okay, there's a certain amount of ritual that needs to be there, because the ritual is our vehicle for offering our bhakti. And it has to be, when we see the acharyas have given us guidelines on how to offer worship. And one of the things that one of the many things I appreciate about Prabhupada is his practicality in terms of presenting something like deity worship in a way which is very simple, but at the same time maintaining the standards given by our predecessor acharyas.
Mm.
And he always was conscious of keeping it simple so that others could easily do it.
Yeah.
Can I just go back on the first question you asked?
Sure,
I
yeah,
was going
sure.
to bring something about our general, because we're travelling in the US and meeting different communities.
Yes.
One of the things I really appreciate is that often you've got devotees serving as pujaris for like many, many years, and sometimes it can be that they don't get much attention. If that could be one word. They don't get
Recognition.
recognition, attention. So we go there and it's like Like I was at one temple just before I came to the US. I was doing like a 2-day seminar, and it's the first time all the pujaris had got together in one place ever. So the first time they all got together, first time we got to ask lots of questions, and so it's like Ishtagosti for pujaris. We engage in pujari kata, we call it.
Right.
It's very enlivening for pujaris to get together,
Yeah.
to speak about their experiences, to ask questions, and to get to meet the other pujaris who are serving their deities. So I've been really inspired by that. We was in Chicago, Kishore, and we got to meet all the pujaris, most of them, about 30, 25, and they was all excited to be together, and all excited to speak about the service to the deities.
Yeah.
Really nice, So that was the first. Just back to that first question you asked about
Sure.
the experience, it's really nice.
And one thing we've also done over the years, every year in Europe we have a head Pujari Sangha,
Uh-huh.
and a similar kind of idea is they get to come together, they share best practices, they share challenges, they share solutions, and the feedback we generally get from these sanghas is how the devotees really appreciate this opportunity to come together and to, because I guess, especially with something like deity worship, because generally you're doing deity worship when everyone else is in the temple chanting their japa.
Right.
And sometimes the tendency is there to feel like you're a little bit isolated. And so then to have this opportunity to discuss these things in the association of other devotees, it's really kind of relieving to know that everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah.
So I think this has also given devotees a lot of confidence in their service. And that's one of the things we try to do in the ministry, is try to give devotees skills to do the service, give them knowledge on how to do service, but also to give them the confidence that what they're doing is okay. That, they're on the right path.
Yeah. I like what you said, that if the ritual or deity worship is a vehicle for our bhakti.
Yeah.
I really like that, because sometimes you can think like it's so ritualistic in some ways. Like some devotees are really off-put by deity worship, actually. I know.
For sure.
Like they're more into like hearing and chanting, reading and all those things. But deity worship is kind of like far away because it's so much ritual, and you have to dress a certain way, and you have to, so.
But there's so many aspects. You look at the devotional practice, there's so much ritual there.
Yeah.
Even like chanting japa every day is a ritual.
Yeah.
Putting on tilak is a ritual. Chanting Gayatri is a ritual.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it in a scheduled way. So even with japa, there's an element of pancharatrika there, because you're chanting a prescribed number of rounds.
Right.
If you're just chanting in kirtan, that's more the Bhagavat Vidi. But if you're doing it in a regulated way, that's pancharatric Vidi. And the idea with a ritual is to try to focus the mind and senses so we can purify. That's the whole point. And that's why Pancharatra is necessary.
Yeah.
To think that we can go back to Godhead without following Pancharatra in this day and age is just, it's a pipe dream.
The goal of the ritual that we always tell devotees, we ask them, well, what's the goal of Pujari service? What's the goal of the ritual? Is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. So the other side, if you get too much involved in ritual, like the Brahmanas in the Krishna book, they came to beg for some bhoga, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So two go together. You do a ritual, but it's meant to aid us and help us to always think of Krishna. It has its purpose.
Yeah. Regarding home worship, I know devotees have deities at home. I feel like there's this misconception about installing deities at home versus, like, devotees think that just because I've installed them, now I have to have like a temple standard. Could you talk a little bit about, do deities at home need to be installed?
Well, if we look at Prabhupada's personal example, he only formally installed with a big ritual 2 or 3 sets of deities. He didn't, like in Vrindavan, in Hyderabad, and Malati mentioned there was one other place that Prabhupada did the full ritual. But, even you look at San Francisco, he put the Shamasundar carved the deities, he put the deities on the altar, they got a plate with a whole pile of candles on it, and everyone offered 7 circles, and that was the installation.
Right.
So we see how Prabhupada in different places did different things and it's like Narad Muni says to Dhruv Maharaj in the 4th canto, according to time, place, available conveniences and inconveniences. Right. And so we always have to keep that firmly in mind. It's like deity worship is not going to be the same everywhere. And just like, in the household environment, what's your capacity to be offering 6 artis and offerings a day, dressing the deities morning and night with very, very opulent dressing, offering fresh garlands every day,
Yeah.
etc., etc., etc. I mean, there's so much. Murali Manohar Prabhu sat down one time and figured out how many hours goes each week into serving the deities in London. It was more than 500 hours
Per week?
per week.
Man hours, added
Man
up,
hours,
with
right.
everyone doing service, if you
Yeah.
add it all up.
The preparation of the garlands
Yeah,
and
making
the
them Mongolian
buying.
The
Sweets.
sweets and all that. So it's more than
Wow.
500 hours.
Oh my
So
gosh.
what person has that capacity at home?
Yeah.
And
But
if-
we can understand, like Sri Srila Vishnu Thakur, he says in the Govastika, Sri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Sringara Tan Mandira Marjanado. So this is our guideline.
Hmm.
He's saying that the deity must be, we'll say Nitya means daily.
Mm.
Sringara, you dress the deities. Mandira Marjanado, you clean the temples. Every day you dress the deities, you offer them food, you offer them arti, and you clean the temple
Yeah.
every day.
Mm.
Once a day is enough, but you should do it every day. And Prabhupada, he told the same thing to Mullah. He said, it doesn't matter what you do it every day.
Mm.
Because the idea of Pancharatra is regulation. Through regulation, you purify the mind and senses.
Right.
And if you want to get the benefit, you follow the rule. Because it's Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is governed by rules. If you want to get the benefit of it, you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, you don't get the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not rocket science, but it is a science.
Mm.
It's a pretty simple thing. You follow the rule, you get the benefit. Simple as that.
Mm.
And the acharyas have given us the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, so an installation will generally, if you read in Hari Bhakti Vilas and you read about the qualification for and the procedures for installing a deity, there wouldn't be hardly any deities in our movement because
Right.
of the qualifications that's needed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Prabhupada would do it very simple. And I don't think Prabhupada, someone might say, well, he did it simple because there was no one trained, no other, not many devotees available who knew the science of. But I think perhaps Prabhupada showed us according to what he was dealing with.
Mm.
So, I mean, it can be, so you can do it, so installation in your home will be according to your means.
Yeah.
It can be simple, invite family, or can invite devotees from the temple, or invite someone to come and speak, have an abhishek.
Yeah.
There's other aspects you can introduce as well,
Sure.
which are there. But generally, it doesn't have to be like full prana pratishtha as you see in temples.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You just start the worship. You could start on a auspicious day,
Yeah.
like
I think also- Yeah. I think I also heard something that Srila Prabhupada wanted, like, he wanted like mass amounts of deities, dolls made like Gorni Tai. And he said, you can just put them in people's houses.
Yeah.
Do you remember hearing something like that?
Yeah, that.
To Dhananjaya.
Yeah, to Dhananjaya. Yeah.
And you just tell the person, even if they're a non-devotee, just tell them that this will bring you good luck or something.
Yeah, but see, that was for non-devotees.
Okay.
It's for non-devotees. But when devotees have deities at home,
Yeah.
there should be some worship. There should
Right.
be dressing. There should
Yes,
be
yes.
bathing.
Yes.
So Prabhupada is for non-devotees. They're like good luck dolls.
Oh, right. Good luck. Yeah.
Good luck dolls. So that's for non-devotees. But devotees, if they have deities at home, there should be some worship. Not,
Yeah.
not-
Daily.
yeah, daily. Not a temple standard. But,
Yeah, like if you look at, there's a purport in the 6th canto, chapter 3, where Prabhupada talks about the installation of Vrindavan.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how unintelligent people are attracted by these Vedic rituals. And then, Prabhupada mentions there how he felt that they were forced to do these, waste money on costly rituals. Whereas for him, the devotees chanting kirtan in the temple, this was the real installation.
Mm.
So again, we have to look at Prabhupada. Prabhupada had deep faith in the holy name. That's obvious. I mean, you just look at Tompkins Square Park, what he was doing there. Deep, deep faith in the holy name. You just go out and chant Hare Krishna, and from that, this movement's being built.
Yeah.
And so for the same with the installation, he was saying, the chanting of the holy name by the devotees, this is the installation. And he felt that these costly rituals were really a waste of money. But of course, in some places, again, time, place, available, convenience, and inconvenience, some places it's necessary, like in Vrindavan. Prabhupada felt that he hadn't have done the ritual there, then the locals wouldn't have taken it seriously. They wouldn't have think this was a bona fide deity.
Yeah.
So some places also in ISKCON, that's the situation, is they install deities, and then if they don't do the costly rituals, then people don't think that something substantial's happened.
Well,
So if we if we're in that situation, then obviously we need to do that. But if we don't need to do that, then I'm just convinced to keep it simple.
Yeah.
well, it could be that it's very important. Say that there's a new temple, so there's a big congregation, so it's a big event when the deities are installed in the temple. So so in that sense, a 2-day, 3-day installation
Yeah.
could have a big impact on them for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's it can really, it can be a wonderful experience because, of course, we're going to have chanting of the holy name throughout the installation process, and the whole event over 2 days can make a big impact on. Devotees will keep it in their hearts. It was a very special event. So
Yeah.
from that sense, installations.
But the impact I'd like to see is names on the roster,
Yeah.
because that's the big challenge.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That's the big challenge. Is they install deities, and there's many temples coming up in the US and around the world. They install deities, but then and everyone turns up the installation. They want to be part of the installation and all that sort of stuff. But what about the daily worship?
Yes.
My wife often says, I've got to bring my wife into this.
Of
She
course.
often says, everyone loves to see the wedding, but what about the marriage?
yes. It's a great
You
point.
yourself know that.
Yeah.
It's like the wedding, everyone comes, and it's all, the
Yeah.
bride's dressed up and the groom's dressed up, and then all the party kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But the marriage, that's the work.
Mm.
That's the real work.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the deity worship. The installation is great, the festival's great, but what about the daily worship?
Mm.
Yeah,
That's really where you need a community.
Yeah, that crossed my mind when we was in one temple, and it was beautiful temple. Perhaps I won't mention that, but beautiful temple. And I was thinking of the installation. I saw the video, I saw the photos. And then we was there. I just see the pujaris left after the installation.
Wow.
There's not many of them, and they're trying their best to do all the services. When you think of the photos and think of how many people were there at the installation.
Yeah.
I guess it's natural. Everyone's going to come to the installation. Everyone wants to see it. It's a wonderful occasion. But it's good if devotees also can come with a mood of how can I offer to render service to these beautiful deities that have come. Often
But also when we're building temples or when we're coming up with these concepts for projects, we need to look, not just for building the temple and getting the glory of building the temple or whatever, but what about the future? What about 5, 10, 20 years down the track? What arrangements are being made now, or what things are being put into place to ensure that the deity worship goes on? And Srila Prabhupada was concerned about that, and we see that he set up the MVT, the Mayapur Vrindavan Trust, and the original point of that, it's changed now because the situation in Mayapur and Vrindavan has become quite stable.
Yeah.
But the point of setting up the trust was to ensure that the deity worship went on. So he gave money from his own Vyasa Puja donations, and he placed that in a fixed in a fixed deposit to ensure that the worship in Mayapur and Vrindavan went on.
Mm.
So you can see how Prabhupada was very concerned about that. And for instance, in Hungary, I think this is the case in Hungary, Shiva Maharaj has set up a trust fund for the deities
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that there's always income there for the deities.
what they do is they have their Nitya Seva,
Yeah, Nitya Seva. That's
And-
Mayapur they did.
and with that Nitya Seva, then they buy properties, and the money that comes from the rent of these properties goes to maintain the deities. So, one sense, you mentioned 5 or 10 years, we've got to think of maintaining the deities for 100 years,
Yeah.
50 years, 60 years
Wow.
into the future. So that's something to think
Yeah.
about.
Planning is essential.
Yeah.
Like in Mayapur, they have this Nitya Seva. Because it's quite a common thing, my understanding, in the temples in India, but like, especially in Vrindavan, like, where Radha Gopinath, they're actually the landholders there. And all the land around that area, Radha Govinda Temple and Radha Raman Temple, the Radha Gopinath Temple owns that land.
Oh, I see.
And all the houses and stuff. But the way the laws are in India, they can't incrementally increase the rents as the cost of living goes up.
Yeah.
So they're still getting the same amount they were when they established that thing 500 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's not very much money. But what they've done in Mayapur is they set up a Nitya Seva fund. And what they did was like, they put the money in a fixed deposit account.
Yeah.
And They calculate, okay, this arti will cost us X amount to offer in a day. So then you create a fund, and so like for the next 20 years, it's going to cost this much. No, hang on, what they did. Say this arti costs $5. Just for example, this new party costs $5. How much money do we need to put in a fixed deposit account to realise $5 from that deposit every year?
Right, like the interest on it, on that account.
Yeah. So that's what they've done. They set up this fixed deposit account, and they have crores of rupees in this account.
Yeah.
And like, so all the worship at Radha Madhava Temple and the Shingadev Temple, Panchatattva Temple and the Jagannath Temple is covered by this Nitya Seva.
Wow.
All the outfits for the next 5 years in all those temples are already sponsored.
Wow.
So it means like the worship will go on because, Pankaj Angri and Janani Prabhus, they applied good intelligence to setting up this worship so it would go on in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And that's what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted the worship would be maintained because to establish worship at a certain standard and then to reduce it or to stop it is a great offence.
Everyone, you see in India so many temples which were once glorious, now they're dilapidated and they're falling to pieces.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to happen to our ISKCON temples. So we should plan for the future.
I mean, I'm sure there are temples in the world where the deity it's like stressful, like that. Some you don't have enough pujaris, or you don't have enough money, or
quite a lot of temples.
Really?
Yeah, quite a lot of temples.
I guess maybe how would you inspire someone to take like that next step that I want to, I'm not sure about if I want to be a pujari, like what's in it for me in a sort of way.
Love of Godhead.
Can you kind of tell your experiences of like what has deity worship brought to your life from doing it for so many years? Like, could you imagine your life without it?
I was doing book distribution for the first 6 years of my spiritual life.
Yeah.
And then practically the next day I was asked to be a pujari by my spiritual master. And I have to say that I hadn't thought of it before. I hadn't imagined myself doing that service. But it's definitely grown in my heart, and I've become very much attached to it. And I've become very much, also it gives me great inspiration in my spiritual life. If we're in the right consciousness, it can be a very profound experience.
Yeah.
When you're there with Krishna, you're addressing Radha Krishna, or you're actually cooking for Krishna. It can be a really rewarding, enlivening experience.
Yeah.
It can be very profound, actually. So I find it a great source of inspiration in my spiritual life.
Yeah.
The Prabhupada, one time he was meeting with the GBC, and he said, the Pujari is the most fortunate person in the world. Because the Pujari is directly interacting with Krishna. He's dressing Krishna, he's feeding Krishna, he's bathing Krishna. And just and like my experience has been like that. It's like sometimes you actually get this, not always, but sometimes you get this sense that he's right there. This comes sometimes. Like I say, I'm not trying to glorify myself or anything, but I just have had that experience from time to time.
Yeah.
Where I really get that sense of him being there. And I know, like, when I spend time on the altar, when I'm dressing these, whatever, I feel a strong sense of purification. When I participate in festivals and just do my best to try and present the festival in a way that'll be pleasing to Prabhupada, then you get this strong sense of feeling purified.
There's a strong sense of sanctity in the Pujari department.
Right.
Even stronger sense of sanctity when you're there before the Lord. Sometimes I experience that there may be issues going on in the temple, there may be this and that, but when you go onto the altar, everything stops. You're there with Krishna, and it can be a great source of shelter in that regard as well.
Yeah.
Kind of everything around you may be a bit passionate, but when you come onto the altar, it's like uplifts your consciousness because you're right there with the Lord. It's a very sanctified place to be. There addressing the Lord.
Quite a unique experience, and especially if you're able to follow the worship process.
Yeah.
you'll find that you feel the benefit of it. You know, if you get distracted while you're doing the worship, it's really hard to experience that benefit.
It does have its challenges as well, because it's 24 hours, it's like 365 days a year. So Krishna's quite demanding. It's quite demanding. Especially if you're doing full-time bhajari service, it quite as a challenge, because you have to follow not your schedule, but following Krishna's schedule.
Yeah.
But in that sense, if you give ourselves to it, it can be very inspiring. But sometimes it can. Well, everything we do in devotional service is purifying for a conditioned soul.
Yeah.
So when you're doing what the residents of Vrindavan do, you're serving Krishna, trying to serve selflessly, trying our best to self.
And I think that in itself is success. You may not be serving selflessly, but you're trying to. And Prabhupada would sometimes say that Krishna, he only accepts the bright side. So he sees how you're trying to do the best you can. You may not always achieve it. Actually, you probably don't achieve it very often. At least I can talk for myself, at least. I don't achieve it very often, but I know that Krishna sees that endeavor, and that's pleasing to Krishna. And so when you make that endeavor, then there's reciprocation, mercy comes as a result.
Something I've experienced on the altar is that when doing seva, you have to also understand how you're interacting with other devotees. Like, that's really important, because you're interacting with the deity, but then you're also doing service with other devotees, and it matters how you treat other devotees. And so how has it been for you all, like, interacting with other devotees? Has it enhanced, like, just some experiences from just being a pujari, but also how has it affected your relationship with other devotees?
Well, I think one of the things we teach is we look at the values and attitudes, lifestyle of purity.
Right.
Because one of the things you do see, is generally those who are attracted to deity worship, their natures are that they like to take shelter of things that are predictable, like rules and regulations and things like that. That helps them to feel secure within themselves. And oftentimes you find people who are like that are not really good at interacting with others. And as a result, you'll see they can disrespect Vaishnavas. And one of the things that I've seen that over the years, so one of the things I've tried to do is try to understand more about the nature of Vaishnavas and how dear Vaishnavas are to Krishna. And there's many wonderful discussions in Prabhupada's books about the importance of Vaishnava Sangha, about how dear Vaishnavas are to Krishna and how important devotees are and things like that. So we really try to give emphasis to that in our training. Just like we have this one class that's called, beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviors. And we explore that in terms of like, okay, what are the intrinsic beliefs of members of ISKCON? GBC is working on a document right now, I can't remember them all, but there's 10, it's just like a dasamula of ISKCON. And so there's 10 beliefs that are there. And this forms the basis of our belief. And so we look at what values do they generate. And then from those values, what kind of attitudes are you going to develop? And then from the attitudes, what kind of behavior? And we also explore from, okay, what are the desirable behaviors in a pujari? Obviously you've got things like cleanliness, punctuality, things like that. We also have this document with, like, when I first took on this service I think it was about 1999 or something like that, I wrote to, maybe 2000, I wrote to devotees all around the world who I knew had been involved in deity worship for some time or during Prabhupada's time, and asked them what they thought were the 10 most important principles of deity worship.
Oh, wow.
And I got about maybe 50, 60 responses, and I distilled all those, and I just took out the 10 top points. And then I also got their comments that they made, and I kind of put them into a little bit of explanation. And so we also present that as part of one of the classes we do, and looking at what kind of things what sort of attitude should we be demonstrating in our seva. And things like, I'm sure, you've come across this in the past, is like one person does a particular type of service, and because they're doing that service, they think this is the best.
Mm-hmm.
I.e., book distribution or management or pujari seva, they think because it's the best because I'm doing it, because I can only do the best.
Mm-hmm.
And this creates tension among services. But actually, if we understand the philosophy, we understand that it's absolute. It doesn't matter what service you do, because it's connected to Krishna, it's absolute, and you'll get the same benefit if you do it with the proper consciousness.
Yeah.
So, looking at it from that perspective, we try to see how all services are absolute and how you can get equal benefit. It doesn't matter what service you do in ISKCON, if you put your heart into it, you're going to get the benefit.
Yeah.
You ultimately, you're going to go back to Godhead if you purify it, or if you perfect yourself in that service. So that's one angle on that.
Mm.
Yeah, I generally find those devotees who you serve with on a daily basis, you can develop a really sweet relationship with.
Mm.
Yeah.
So especially serving the Lord in the Bhajaya department. It's kind of intimate in one sense. It's nice because you're focused on the same thing, and it's really good things.
Yeah.
And like even like Murali and I have been doing service together at various levels since 2000 and I can't remember now. It's been quite a while. 2000.
But you said you started in '99.
Yeah.
This service.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I attended a course in 2010.
Yeah, so it was around
So
2010, maybe
Mhm.
a bit before that when I first started. It was before that when I started coming to London.
Oh yeah, much.
Yeah. And so just over the years through doing service on the altar in London and doing other services, I think, a deep appreciation has grown of each other.
Yeah.
And so I think in any service, just by doing service together, not just deity worship, by just doing service together, you get to know. And by hearing people's stories, I remember one time I was on one of the GBC team building committee, and we were at New Vrindavan, and we did this team building exercise, where we put devotees into, I think it was groups of 3 or 4, and we came up with, I can't remember the questions now, I've got them on my hard drive somewhere, but the idea was to just ask each person in the group these 3 questions, I think it was, about each other. And some of the responses devotees were getting were just like, wow, I never knew that you'd done this for Srila Prabhupada. And so it was a real eye-opener just to learn more about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes you'll see that we tend to develop these perceptions based on what we observe, but they're not always accurate.
Yeah.
So by taking the time to get to know people, and like sometimes it comes up that people will see some service that someone's doing in the deity department, for instance, they might develop a negative attitude towards them. But if you get to know the person, as Murali Manohar Prabhu was pointing out before, you'll see that actually they're quite sincere.
Mm.
And to the best of, maybe they can't do the service as good as you, but is that the benchmark? Is that what we're gauging things on, is the way you do the service?
Yeah.
No, we have to try and look at, everyone's serving according to their capacity. And there's that interesting story in the Ramayana about, how there was a spider who was throwing grains of sand into the sea, and Hanuman's throwing these mountain peaks into the sea, and he's making fun of the spider and telling him to get out of the way, otherwise he'll get hurt. And then Ram corrected him and said, no, but he's serving me to the best of his capacity.
Yeah.
Same as you are, even though externally it seems to be different.
Mm.
And this is one of the things I try to appreciate in service, is that devotees, generally speaking, are doing the best they can. But they all have different capacities, so we need to try to appreciate the capacity. But of course, when it comes to things like cleanliness, I really have to just say what's going on, because that's my service. I'm meant to be, encouraging devotees to follow standards of worship.
Yeah.
And that's a major thing, because if things aren't clean, there's a good chance, based on Prabhupada's instructions, there's a good chance that Krishna's not going to be accepting that service.
Mm.
So, it would be negligent of me not to point these things out.
Mm-hmm.
But I just need to be able to point it out in a way that's, trying to show that I care. Not just I'm trying to be a policeman or something, because that's not my interest at all.
Yeah.
was just trying to show that I really care about their service to the deities. And I was talking to Malati about this the other day, and she was also bringing that out about how when they were dealing with Prabhupada, they really got a clear sense that Prabhupada loved them. And so I think this is one thing about the Vaishnava Sangha. As you get to know devotees more and more, and as you serve with devotees more and more, then this affection grows in the heart. And then rather than saying things from the perspective of trying to control, you can say things from the perspective of trying to help and try to facilitate them serving Krishna better.
Yeah, especially within the Bhajara department, I find it is very important for devotees to have good relationships with each other.
Yeah.
So we have to work on it as well. It doesn't come naturally sometimes. You have to give it time, you have to give it attention, because you're directly dealing with Krishna. So it doesn't look very good as well if the devotees are having intense disagreements with each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't look well. So it's important for those who are serving the Lord directly, especially, well, all Vaishnavas, especially on those who are serving the Lord directly, should have nice Vaishnav-like relationships.
Yeah. For someone who's doing the Nitya Seva, like for example, full-time every single day, how do you suggest that they not get into kind of like a robotic, just following, okay, this is the 100 steps I need to do. And then, but the main thing of deity worship is devotion and love. So how do we develop that without getting entangled in like, oh, I'm on step 24 and now I always skipped step 26, 25. So now, I'm mental. But you're missing the point in some ways, right? If you're too much into that part.
Yeah, that can be a problem, especially devotees doing service 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, the same thing, the same place,
Yeah.
I see you have to visit the preaching field. You got to get out sometimes. You got to go on Harinam, go on book distribution, go and join the kirtan.
Right.
Don't miss out on that. Some devotees, some pujaris can become a bit insular and lose touch with that. So it's very important. From at least I find personally for myself when I was doing full-time pujari service, I would find it very, very inspiring to take part in the kirtan, go down to the Guru Puja, dance, go on Harinam as much as you can, once a week, once every 2 weeks or whatever, but don't go on book distribution. Don't lose touch with the preaching field.
Yeah.
And, that will give it, that will help.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it can be just, ho-hum.
Right.
Well, also I think I agree 100% with what Murali's saying there. You have to be in the fire. Because you're not in the fire, you'll go cold. Also, an important part of that is to understand what is the purpose of these rules and regulations.
Yeah.
It's not just about rules and regulations. The idea is to purify the heart so we can chant Hare Krishna purely. Yeah. Purify the heart so we can understand who it is we're serving and who we are and what we're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another point in that is devotees, pujaris should have good sadhana.
Yeah.
Sometimes pujaris don't have or may not have good sadhana, but it's so important to have good sadhana. I try myself when I'm dressing the deities, then I don't chant japa, but I have my japa period, set japa period. It's from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So and I've always had that, and it's really helped.
Wow.
So it's good for pujaris also too, like all devotees, we should have good sadhana, reading. Should attend Bhagavatam class. Sometimes pujaris can miss Bhagavatam class for a year, and that's not good. You should try to, attend the Bhagavatam class, read, have sanghas where you perhaps, because we have some sanghas in London of all pujaris, and we get together and we just read the sastra. So that was very important as well as pujaris.
Yeah.
There's a lecture Prabhupada gave in Mayapur,
Garagraha,
and where he talks about if we don't have a life of hearing and chanting, then these deities become a stone, like a burden, a stone around the neck. And so Prabhupada also, he really emphasized the importance of hearing and chanting for everyone, pujaris included. We all have to have this life of hearing and chanting. Chanting our rounds regularly, reading Bhagavatam, reading scriptures regularly. Not just we do our service and chant our japa and that's it. No, we need to hear the philosophy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how do we understand who it is we're serving? We We need to hear the philosophy daily. Nityam bhagavata sevaya. So as Murali Prabhu was saying, attend class. Maybe not every day, but at least 3-4 days a week, attend class. And listen to Prabhupada's lectures as much as you can. Hear and chant, participate in kirtan. This is the process. Deity worship is not the process. We've got to understand that. It's not the process. It helps us to become purified so we can practice the process properly. Because we're so conditioned. Jiva Goswami points this out in the Bhakti Sandarbha. We're so conditioned because of the effect of this age of Kali, we're unable to sit down and just chant Hare Krishna. Thakur Haridas did that, but how many of us are like that? Mm-hmm. So by practicing deity worship, the heart becomes purified. And if we practice it properly, the heart becomes purified, and then we're able to chant the holy name peacefully. Mm-hmm. It's part of the it's part of the process of devotional service. Prabhupada's given us not just Prabhupada's given us, but the acharyas have given us this very scientific process. Even going back as far as Jiva Goswami, you can see, very scientific process. If we apply it according to the way, it's not all about the rules and regs, it's about applying the process the way the acharyas have instructed us and envisioned that we would do it. Then we'll get the benefit of the process, our hearts become purified, we'll chant the holy name purely, we'll develop love of God, and we'll go back home.
Yeah.
Simple process. Now, I have some questions for you.
Okay. Sure.
So you attended the Mayapur Academy training.
Yes.
Right? So maybe I'll explain about the Mayapur Academy first off.
Sure.
What happened was I started doing courses in Mayapur in 1999, Janani Prabhu, Pankaj Prabhu, and myself. And we initially just used to do demonstrations on how to do the worship. And then I was dissatisfied with that because I could see that the devotees weren't really learning what I wanted to learn. So probably around about 2003, I introduced a big change in the course where not only did we demonstrate, but then we had the devotees doing the worship. We assessed them for doing the worship. And the assessment is still evolving now, but it evolved over a number of years how to assess devotees on that. And then so after the first time we did that, where the devotees were doing the assessment, I went over to see Janani Prabhu, and I said, Prabhu, what do you think of that? And he thought about it for a while. I think you've interacted with Janani Prabhu.
Sure.
And he doesn't answer quickly. He's very deep.
Yeah.
And he thought about it, and he said, so when do we start? He said, so when do we start the school? And I said, what do you mean? He said, when do we start the Bajari school?
Wow.
And then, so I didn't respond to that immediately. I was thinking in my mind, as soon as we can. Then I was traveling to the UK at that. I think it was about 2000. I can't remember what year it was. 2004 possibly. And I got a call from Pankaj. My wife and I were in London at the time, and we were just heading back. And we got a call. I got a call from Pankaj, and he said, I found a place to build the school. Come to Mayapur straight away. And so I spoke to my wife about it, and we were heading back to Australia. And so we parted, and she agreed to it, and we parted ways in Sri Lanka. I got off the flight in Sri Lanka. She flew back to Australia, and then I went from Sri Lanka across to Chennai, and then caught a train or whatever up to Mayapur, and then we went and looked at the location where the school is now. And then Koma Chaitanya and myself designed the school, and Koma Chaitanya supervised the building of it. So that's the history of how it came about. And so what we do there is we're teaching devotees how to function as a pujari in an ISKCON temple. All aspects like deity dressing, the bathing and dressing of small deities, how to cook for the deities, how to make outfits.
Festivals,
the whole thing. Samskars, the basic, how to do initiation yagya. Yeah. We even have a course now called the Vaishnavi Samskars, where the ladies will learn all the different supporting elements of the samskars.
Right.
And then so that started in 2005, and then in 2014, we were blessed to have you and your wonderful wife as students there.
Yes.
So what inspired you to be a student there?
I think someone that I knew did it before, and they said it was an amazing experience. And I already had done Bhakti Shastri in Vrindavan and years before, and I thought a good way to stay in the Dham for a long period of time, extended period of time, is to do some type of like focused course, because you're focused. You can't like kind of get into nonsense because you're like into this core. You pay for it. You gotta do it. It's like a school. So that's, and then we had just been married like the year before. So I said, we're gonna work probably the rest of our lives. So I don't want to like go straight into working. I want to travel and experience things. So I think Tulsi wasn't even initiated at that time, or she was just, she's a Gurukuli, so I guess there's some concession. Yeah, there's some concession for that. But yeah, I mean, that was like probably top 5 experiences of my life.
So tell me about your experience.
I mean, just being there in Mayapur, that's one thing. But then being with you all, Pankajangri Prabhu and Jananivas Prabhu, and the other students, like I still keep in touch with a lot of the students that I was with there. That's 10 years ago. And they're in all different corners of the world, and I still keep in touch with them and just build like really good friendships with the devotees and learning like really hands-on training of deity worship and all the studying that you need to do, the Brahminical culture and ethics. That was such a fantastic course. And I just enjoyed it. It's just like everything, and then the Dham on top of it just makes it for such an amazing experience. Oh, you're graded on how many morning programs you go to. Like you have to be there for the morning program, and in some ways that was like a little bit daunting. But then when you got into it and got taste for like going to the morning program, you're like, okay, this is why devotees are meant to go to the morning program, because it inspires you in your own Krishna consciousness. It makes you enlivened. You get your sadhana, done in a really nice, focused way. And to this day, I use the things I learned from there, as far as like the Sodasa Upachar Puja, I do at my local temple still, and once a week, even though I have a job and I have kids and stuff. But that's something I really look forward to every week, that I can do this seva. And I teach other devotees as well, because they know that I was trained in the, ISKCON headquarters, to do this seva. So devotees ask me like, oh, can you show me like how you do it? And can I observe you and things? So it also brings a type of like authority of deity worship to be trained under devotees in Mayapur.
And so if someone else were to ask you about Mayapur Academy, what would you tell them?
I would say, don't even think about it. Just go and do it, because it's the best thing that you could ever do. Honestly, it is. And if you're interested in deity worship, you absolutely should do it. Even if you want to learn how to dress the deities in a specific way. I mean, like, there's all facility for that. Life-size, huge deities that you can actually dress, and they'll teach you how to do everything. And all the teachers are so qualified and nice, and just a really, really fantastic experience. So if you're listening to this and you want to do I'm going to put the link in the description of how to get in touch with the devotees to, enroll. How many times a year is it?
We do an English diploma every year.
Every year?
Once a year we do also Hindi and Bengali.
And you have a full batch every year?
Yeah.
That's great.
Limited spaces each year.
Yeah.
Really?
Because we can only because how the assessment works with the Sodasvachar Puja, how each person's assessed. We can only really do about 35 or 6. That's our max. With the dressing, there's 2 groups of Korma Chaitanya Prabhu prefers 16, but sometimes we push him to 20.
Oh, wow.
But because see, one of the things that is really important, we believe, is like one-on-one time with the facilitators.
Totally, yeah.
And like when you're practicing for the Sodasvachar Puja, then you'll have devotees there who experience that. They're helping you through the practice, helping you, to show you different aspects of it so you can learn. And it's really effective. We just did a course in Radhadesh, and I was actually taken aback. Actually, there was 2 young ladies there from Western Europe. I think they're from Spain, somewhere like that. One of the girls did the first assessment. One of the girls did the last assessment. The one who did the first assessment, both of them never done anything deity worship before at all in their lives. 6 days, and she got the worship down. With
140 steps or whatever?
With 2 or 3 small mistakes.
Wow.
So this is the benefit of getting hands-on training. It's like devotees sitting there with you and showing, maybe you could do it like this, and you might find that's a little bit easier, or, and the way we help,
So you travel and you do like a condensed version of it?
Yeah, we just to do like a 10-day version of the temple worship module.
Oh, the temple worship. Okay.
Yeah, the other things we've talked about. So
yeah,
we're going to look at that. But one of the things we want to try and work on now is a head pujari course.
Yeah,
I think
so
that's
it needs to be
really,
head pujari, the different skills that's needed.
totally.
Yeah.
but I think it's really important because I mean, one of the things is like, again, no one's questioning the sincerity of devotees. No one's questioning their desire to try and please Krishna.
Yeah.
But sometimes we lack skills because we're not trained in these things.
Yeah.
Things like especially interpersonal skills. Conflict resolution, mediation, communication skills, all this type of stuff. So Murali Prabhu's been studying a little bit about mediation lately. And I've just recently written to Braj Bihari, and we'll get some input from him. But just looking at how the pujaris or head pujaris can be more effective in their service, so that rather than people being disillusioned because they've experienced dissatisfaction or even sometimes being hurt in their service, how we can create an environment in our temples where they feel nurtured in that service, so they'll be happy to stay there for years and years and to come.
Yeah.
Head pujari is a service which you're dealing with many people about many, many different things.
And details,
Very
really
detailed,
things you have to kind of
And you can make or break a temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with devotees properly, they'll just go away. It's a volunteer organization, right?
And you can make or break a devotee too in that environment.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, it's like when someone comes to devotional service, it's like they're like a budding creeper.
Yeah.
Like when you have a little seedling coming up, just one nip from an insect, the thing falls over and dies.
Yeah.
But when you get into a tree, you can weather the greatest of storms. So looking at how to equip those devotees with the skills, the values, the knowledge, so they can actually nurture devotees' growth in devotional service.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. Well, thank you, Prabhus. It's been, I mean, do you have anything else to add as far as something you want to communicate to the wider Vaishnav community?
Well, thank you for giving us opportunity.
Oh, no problem.
It's
so nice to talk to you.
Wonderful to discuss about Pujari Seva and everything, all the details that's involved in it. I just encourage devotees, please, in the different temples that we visit throughout the USA, throughout Europe, there is a need for devotees to come forward and to give support and to offer services in our various Pujari services in our ISKCON society. And especially devotees find it inspiring when the leaders get involved. Because when the leaders get involved and show an interest,
Like Gopal Krishna Maharaj.
like Gopal Krishna Maharaj
Yeah.
and others. So just, please, devotees, don't feel shy about approaching your head pujari or the temple president, but please get involved and help out in the worship, and you'll feel very enlivened from it. Please come forward and help the different to worship the Lord.
For me, I think one of the most important things I can share is we really need to learn how to appreciate each other and the service we offer. If you look at any country, any place in the world, how many devotees are there? You look like a place like America, you've got 300 million people, 320 million people in America. How many devotees in America? They're rare.
Yeah.
And they're special people. They're people who are making a commitment, making the endeavor to give their lives to Krishna. So if we can just be more appreciative of each other and understand that we all have different natures, we all have different conditioning, so we're going through different things at different times, so we may not react the way you think we should react.
Yeah.
Just try to appreciate the fact that this person is trying their best to give their life to Krishna. And I think if we can just appreciate each other more, ISKCON would be a much nicer place.
Beautiful. Agreed 100%. Thank you, Prabhus. Thank you so
so
much for
much,
coming.
Russ.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to
Again,
see you.
After such a long time.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad we got to sit down and talk.
Your family's so beautiful.
Spontaneously.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So if you'd like to get in touch with these devotees, I'm going to put the ways you can get in contact with them in the links in the description.
idwm@iscon.org.
Okay, I'll get that from you and I'll put it in the description. Also, if you want to enroll in the Mayapur Academy, which I really highly recommend, happens once a year in Mayapur in India. I'll put that information in the description as well. Just the Mayapur just the ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry, I know, has a website also with a lot of resources.
So does Mayapur Academy, mayapuracademy.org.
Okay, mayapuracademy.org. So I'll put that also in the description. And thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And have a good night, everyone. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.